My whole world was the church growing up. Um, we had a television, but there was only certain things we could watch, and there was no secular music in our home, and there was no playing cards, there was no dancing, there was no really extracurricular other than sports was okay. It was
You had a
my
very
world
conditioned
the church.
upbringing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I went from that to a private Christian school, which the entire campus of the school at a high school that I went to and a Bible college, the town itself was isolated and the whole town was a school. So yeah, there was a lot.
So I can understand why you're saying it's quite cult-like. Literally, you're living in this town where everyone is indoctrinated to the religion, and you don't really you get to see anything outside of the world almost. It's like you're in a bubble. Welcome to the Queer Quest podcast, your beacon of light and sprinkle of glitter in the queer community. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for queer individuals. And together, we're embarking on a journey of transformation. Each week, we bring you a new training topic or connect you with visionary queer leaders in healing and coaching, diving deep into conversations that inspire growth, celebrate diversity, and empower you to live authentically. So wherever you are, settle in and let's get ready to unlock the vibrant potential within. This is where your quest begins. Hello, all you fabulous souls, and welcome to this week's episode of the Queer Quest podcast. I'm your host, Cristiano Green, and this week we have a special guest on the podcast. We've got Murray Browatze, who is a trauma-informed coach today, helping a lot of people in our community who deal with religious trauma, childhood trauma. So welcome to the podcast, Murray.
What a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know you've just moved into the online space, but you've been coaching for many years now, right?
Well, yeah, I have a history for sure. And then there was a big long break where we did some different things. Um, in the past, I worked primarily with kids with disabilities and their families, and training and coaching staff to work with them to be integrated fully into their communities and schools and that sort of thing. And my partner and I were also foster parents for a decade.
Oh, wow.
We had usually between 6 and 8 kids, but sometimes we had more,
Six and
depending
eight
on.
children at once.
Yeah.
Wow. You went for it. You went for it, Murray.
Well, we got kids that were often difficult to place in another place, like in regular homes. And our job, again, our job is to either integrate them back into their families or into their communities in more meaningful kinds of ways. So, yeah. And then we took a little respite, and we had a big gay hotel in beautiful Palm Springs, California. And then we moved back up to Canada about 11 years ago now. And we have a nightclub, currently still own a nightclub. But
a nightclub, a queer nightclub?
A big old gay nightclub. We're the only one in the city of 1 million people. So yeah, we try to be all things to all people. And sometimes it's challenging, but
totally, yeah. I can imagine, yeah.
But yeah, during COVID, with all the shutdowns and stuff, it gave me time to kind of look at what direction I wanted to go. The club didn't need to be babysat, other than, now that we're open again, we survived, which a lot of businesses and a lot of queer businesses did it. So we're grateful about that. But it also gave me a time to kind of refocus and,
what you really wanted to do with the next chapter of your life then, yeah?
Well, exactly. And it's kind of like my very late midlife crisis, I guess.
Very late midlife crisis. I loved hearing that. So, Murray, you talked, we just mentioned before that, of course, that you help a lot of people with religious trauma. I'd love to kind of talk, because I know that when we were talking offline, you mentioned that you kind of grew up, in a very religious upbringing, which was kind of almost cult-like, which is what I hear from a lot of young queer people. Would you want to tell us a little bit more about it, paint the picture of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very hyper-religious. I don't know. And it's, I do say it's cult-like, but it's anything, any religion or philosophy that keeps you locked into a certain place and tells you that everything else is bad and wrong, that's cult-like as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, so it
Yeah,
was
I can understand that. Yeah.
I came from a long line of religion. So there's a lot of family stuff for sure. My dad was a pastor.
Oh,
He
God.
did church planting and that sort of thing for a number of years before he moved into the social work field, working with children as well. Um, my brother and sister were missionaries in different places, and my whole world was the church growing up. Um, we had a television, but there was only certain things we could watch, and there was no secular music in our home, and there was no playing cards, there was no dancing, there was no really extracurricular other than sports was okay. It was
You had a
my
very
world.
conditioned upbringing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I went from that to a private Christian school, which the entire campus of the school and a high school that I went to and a Bible college, the town itself was isolated and the whole town was a school. So yeah, there was a lot.
So I can understand why you're saying it's quite cult-like. Literally, you're living in this town where everyone is indoctrinated to the religion, and you don't really you get to see anything outside of the world almost. It's like you're in a bubble.
100%. When I came out, got caught kind of at 18 years old, the world changed dramatically. And it was like going from a bubble where all of my friends, my family, my music, everything that mattered to me was in the church, to a world where I didn't know anything about, and I didn't know how to fit in. And it was like kind of like
You weren't,
that
you
show
weren't taught
Naked
you
Ray.
pretty much weren't taught to live life outside of this bubble, this religion, this
Mm,
group that you're in, right?
there was no life outside of the bubble. It was my purpose and my family's purpose and the church's purpose was to bring people into our bubble, and that was it. Like that is the beginning and the ending of the life cycle. So when you are forced out of your family in and truly, like I said, it was like the show Naked and Afraid. Like I had no idea what the world was like. So
So you when you say, you kind of had came out, got caught, do you mind sharing a bit more about what you mean by that?
well, of course I knew I was gay for a long time. If you want to teach your kids about being gay, send them to church because they talk about it a lot. You know, gay, adultery, murder. If you want to learn all the vices, send your kids to church because it's a perfect place to learn about. So I knew from an early age what I was. I also knew from an early age how wrong it was.
Yeah.
Uh, um, and I fought it for years. But I think we need to kind of go back to the beginning of the story. Like, for me, one of my first memories is being a young child and sitting in church and between my mom and dad and listening to the preacher talking about hellfire and brimstone, and it was like that's what it was like every day. And I remember standing up and going, "That's wrong! Like that's wrong!" And just like instinctively, I knew. And I think spirituality and religion are very different things, and I do
100%.
still have
Agree, yeah.
a very strong spiritual bent personally, but that doesn't necessarily come into my work because that depends on the individual. Like some
Yeah.
people just need a complete break, at least at this point, from anything to do with spirituality.
I can understand why
And
they would need
yeah,
to really kind of come to terms with what is it that they actually believe it, because all of their beliefs have been passed on to them and banged into them in a sense through the church and all the other people within the church to then go, who am I and what do I actually believe myself,
absolutely, it's more than banged in a sense. Like literally, one of the first things that you're taught is that you are born sinful, you were born bad, you were born wrong, you were born needing to be saved, and that becomes such a part of your core belief system. And it's a big part of the work that I do, is to help people identify those core beliefs that are still stuck and programmed into the subconscious. Because it's 100%, that's the early age is when
0 to 7 years of age is the time when we form our strongest beliefs, and they come from the people around us, our family, the church, the community that we're within, And of course, when you're not allowed to see anything outside of that bubble, right? You've been taught what to do. All of those beliefs become reinforced, which is probably why they don't let you see the outside world.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. That is absolutely a big part of it. But it becomes insidious. And I unfortunately, with my family, there was a history of abuse, especially on my mom's side of the family, like serious abuse. Like the day of my mom's wedding, she was hit over the head with a 2x4 by her mother. And my mom did the best she could based on her
Her
upbringing.
understanding of the world, her belief
But
system that she's been given, and all that. Yeah.
but she was also like, the trauma is generational. The religious trauma, the church trauma is definitely generational. And often the thing that is designed to save you becomes the thing that really can impact negatively on every area of your life as you progress, unless you go back and deal with the traumas. And
Right. Yeah.
my mom didn't have that opportunity or that desire. And, that was certainly passed along as children. Her purpose, like I said, was to save us, make sure that we were saved, because we were born wrong, we were born sinful, we were born evil. I'll share a little bit of a sensitive story just as a pre-warning too. My bedroom in my family home was also my mom's sewing room. It was this tiny little room with her sewing, and she had these great big giant silver scissors. And one time she came in, and I was maybe five-ish, maybe a little bit younger, and I was masturbating. I had no idea what it was. It was so innocent that it meant it had no meaning. But it just, it was like getting a hug. It felt good. And she walked into the room and caught me and picked up her scissors and said, you are an evil little boy and you're going to hell, and I'm going to cut off your penis and kick me out of the house. Yeah, like the trauma was real. Like we're talking real.
I can imagine that would be very traumatic.
And it's weird though, because she had no recollection of that, because she was so in her own trauma, experience, that
Of course.
some of the things that happened in childhood for me just didn't register.
Hurt people, and sometimes people can
Absolutely
kind of go a bit like when they say blank behind the eyes when they do these things, because they get so it triggers what happens to you, probably triggers something within her, which is why she lashed out in such a way, right?
100%. And I don't like, my mom was a beautiful, loving soul who had a lot of shit in her past that she had to deal with, and she did not know how to deal with that. And the church gave her a place to fit in, and it gave her a sense of safety because she needed to be saved.
Okay.
But when a parent does something like what happened to me to a child, and or any number of things, and this is what a lot of the people that I work with, there's isolated little things that they do kind of remember. When the person who is that you love the most in the world and is your protector and is the one who's really responsible for keeping you alive, like literally,
Correct. Yeah.
does something like that, the trauma loop started.
And living life within a hell of a lot of fear, I can imagine as well, right?
Constant again. And I absolutely became a people pleaser. I had to make sure that everybody around me, especially anybody in authority, was happy. I was the best student. I worked the hardest. I played sports, but I was the perfect gentleman. I loved music. Music was kind of my refuge growing up. But even with that, like, one of "You're Only a Sinner Saved by Grace" is a hymn that we sang like 6 times a week in our house. And it
Wow.
just, the power of music to carry things into your subconscious on top of trauma, it's very dramatic. And I think that is one of the reasons why religion and music are so tied closely together. And it can have either a really positive beneficial effect and healing effect, or it can do exactly the opposite. So
Definitely, 100%, because it invokes an emotion in you and a memories within you. So you can, as you said, you can remember the song. Well, you remember what you used to do when you were singing that song and what it did because it brought in some meaning to you, right?
absolutely. And it's like, to this day, hear I could go into any church and sing probably any song that they have. And it's just like, and it's been decades since I've been into a church building, other than weddings and funerals, including my parents, who are both passed. But yeah, it's music and your subconscious programming and trauma. They can all be really tied together. Just like, like that thing about a sense of smell can trigger memories, or like a sound or a song, or a sight. So yeah, it's an interesting process working with people, as I had to do it myself, and dig through all those layers to find, okay,
Imagine.
what's the root cause of where my current disease and discomfort and lack of self-love and needing to please and all of those things came from. So yeah, so it was a journey. It was an
Can
interesting
imagine.
journey.
So you went back there. Then at around 18, you said you got kind of caught, found out.
Yeah, yeah.
What happened there? Did you get kicked out of the church, or what? Tell us, because you said that kind of you got pushed into the real world, and you had no idea. So give us a bit of a understanding of what that looked like.
Well, yeah, it started. I This was just after I graduated high school, and then I took one semester of Bible college, and then I took a semester off and was living at home. I was just 18 years old, and I was walking downtown in my city, and I saw this little tiny shop with men going in and out and in and out. And I went and looked through the door, and I just instinctively knew, okay, this is a gay space. And I probably would have turned and ran, but it was
Curiosity.
summertime. Yeah, the door was open. More than curiosity, someone was standing in the store and saw me and said, "Oh, hello, you can come in." And just because it was someone who's older than me, I automatically obeyed. And so I went in, and I was looking at magazines, and I couldn't believe there was people who posed naked in magazines. Like, really?
Ooh.
Like, for public consumption? And I ended up buying a magazine called The Advocate. And it was a it wasn't pornography. It was very much more the gay newspaper of the day.
Yes, I
Um,
think I'd heard of the Advocate back. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was a huge thing here in North America. And I had circled an ad there, because there was personal ads and there was different things, and I had circled an ad about someone who said that they were a gay Christian, and the concept just didn't. I didn't know how that worked. And um, that was found in my room, and I tried to make up this story that, oh, it's just for a research paper for, how to work with gay people, and how to, because I've seen what happened to the gay people in my church, and how their lives were destroyed by the church, and how many of them were married and trapped in this life that they didn't fit.
Of course.
And when there was no forgiveness, there was that whole, love the sinner, hate the sin. It was like, let's just get rid of everybody. So like, it was like the purging I'd seen happen before. So that immediately threw me into that fear.
Of course, extra layer of trauma, just seeing other people go through something that you go, oh my God, if I get find out, this is what will happen to me,
Yeah. And of course, I tried to pray the gay away, and
I was going to ask you about that. What?
Definitely, it was like I drove myself literally crazy, in a lot of ways, and trying to not be what I knew I was.
I even did that myself, and I wasn't part of the church, So I think a lot of queer people out there can resonate with having to pray, but still, yours was a whole new level of deep.
It is an additional level, and it's not that people who don't come from church can't have just as much family trauma, and it's just for me, it was just like
very deep rooted.
Yeah, and believing that I was sinful, and then believing on top of that I was not worthy to be redeemed because I couldn't pray the gay away. So that means that God really must not love me, and I am this evil, sinful creature that doesn't deserve to live. And then coming out when I did, or being forced out, it was right at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. And then, of course, on top of that, there is this strange disease that in my limited knowledge, only gay people were dying
that's
from.
That's what they told you. Yeah. Only gay people or people of color, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even people of color.
It wasn't even color.
Right it's just like, it was like, this is God's punishment. And, it was on the news, and it was in the papers, and it was, after I was kicked out of the house, the only thing I heard from my dad would call once every few weeks just to remind me how sinful I was, and how, there's this disease that God is trying to show me that my life is wrong, that who I am and my core is wrong. And this is your warning, this is your chance. But it's like, it was beyond that. Even like, I during the summer that this all happened, I was working in a group home for a friend of my dad's. And so not only was I outed, kicked out of my family, kicked out of my church, I had to leave my job because my dad thought for sure that I was going to be molesting the little boys that lived in the group home.
Oh my God.
And like literally every aspect of my identity, that I was at least comfortable or aware enough to express, was stripped away all at once. So it was a very dramatic and traumatic thing.
Of course. How did you deal with that, and what did that lead for you as Murray, as a young man? Like, what did it turn to? Like, yeah, like what the big wide world is there now. Like, what happened to you?
Yeah, I was very fortunate because so many people with that kind of trauma, they go so far to extremes. Trauma can trigger, addiction, and it can trigger an inability to function properly in the world.
Exactly.
Suicide.
Yeah, I've heard that from many people. Yeah, addictions. That.
Yeah, I certainly had a brief period of time prior to that where the idea of suicide was in my head.
The real thing, yeah.
Even that couldn't stick there because that was just another layer of sin on top of my already terrible self. So yeah, that even the escape that seemed like the only escape was not an option. So yeah, I was very fortunate though that I met my partner right around that time. He was actually just before I came out.
Your partner that you're with today?
39 years later.
Amazing. That's fantastic. He's I guess, your savior, I guess, in a sense, probably.
Well, it was different. He was young. He came from there was some religion in his family, but it wasn't really a part of his identity. He had just come out of a really, really bad relationship, and he was he was young as well when we learned a lot together.
You've been, well, over
Going
39 years. I'd hope you'd learn a lot together.
but yeah, it's and then relationships change, dynamics change, and our lives change, and we've done lots of different things, and it's just I was fortunate, and I still had, for me, as far as sexually, I knew nothing other than the few little pictures that I seen in magazines and talks in church about sodomy and all that sort. We didn't have the internet back then, so I couldn't really look things up. So yeah, I was very naive, but we lasted. We met, we lasted, our lives grew and transformed together, and religion was something that said it wasn't a big part of our life experience, except with my partner's grandmother. She was a devout Anglican, lived in a tiny little town on Vancouver Island, but my God, there was what real Christianity looked like, the love and the acceptance. And I couldn't believe that they, in their tiny little church on this tiny little island in this tiny little town, they had a lesbian minister. And it was just like, the difference was incredible.
Chalk and cheese, basically, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so from there, it was a journey. There was certainly a while where I just had to learn how to live in a world I didn't know. So just basically surviving and getting a job and learning how to talk to people,
figuring life out, really, like without anyone there, I guess, within your family or your support system to help you, because again, you've been kicked out, or what have they say, excommunicated or from the church? Is that what they say? Excommunicated? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it. That's more of a. There's certain religions that use that word. I was just kicked out. Like,
you got the kick the hell out of there.
I was gone. I was gone, and but I didn't even really know how to talk to people that weren't part of that. So like, it was the level of naivety was astronomical. And I think, like I said, the timing was different. Like I said, there was no internet, there was no social media, there was not a lot of the things that are available now to kids. But I still think the work that we do is in this field is so important, because it doesn't matter that there's internet when you're, from your earliest memories, you're so indoctrinated with exactly the same thing that I was.
Of course.
So all that is, oh, look, there's more ways that you can see how bad the rest of the world is. And so, like, yes, life is different for queer kids now in a lot of ways, but not all.
And all this stuff that you went through, there are still places that this is all still happening, right? So it's not like things have changed. Like, there's still all this stuff happening for people, right? And I'm sure listeners out there can relate to this at some level of like your story. There's probably people who have a very similar story as well out there as well, because you've probably helped many of them.
Absolutely, and it's just like, and different people are going to respond to their traumas in different ways and not see how it impacts. A lot of people think, well, I'm free of the church now, but until you've dealt with those, like I said, I talk a lot about the subconscious in my work, because until you've really actually dealt and unwound those trauma loops and reprogrammed your subconscious beliefs, it impacts on every single area of your life. Your ability to love yourself, your ability to love others, your work performance, your sense of what you're capable of, what you should desire, as far as having a good life. Horrible messages around money growing up for me. It was just part of that. You know, my mom, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart for her, because she took all of the lessons of the church, and then they were rolled up so much in her trauma that she created her own doctrine of unworthiness, and that was definitely passed on.
Passed on to
in,
you
in
and your siblings as well. Yeah.
yeah, like I remember anytime the slightest little mistake in that, and or sin, as it was called, we would I would get this lecture how you were crucifying Jesus all over again. And it's just like, whoa, what a thing for a child, the
Definitely.
one being who is supposed to love you unconditionally beyond your parents, and is you're doing this terrible thing that, like, it's the stupidest little childhood mistake, as simple as spilling something, or it was just like, it was extreme. So I do understand that the level are different for different people, but the root cause can have exactly the same impact or no impact. So, like, some people can really bounce it off, and some
Yeah.
people can come out of that experience. And I do think there is, because for me, spirituality is still important, and the people that are coming in to our world now are better equipped, I think, to deal with a lot of that stuff. I think there is a raising of the level of consciousness of humanity that's happening. And whether you want to just look at that as evolution or spirituality or whatever, I think that is. Because depending on the person, it is or it isn't a part of my work. Some people want help finding a spiritual path. I know for me, it was essential for my
Of
for my
course,
mental
I think
health.
for a lot of queer people, the experience of coming out and coming to terms with who you are actually is a deep spiritual experience. And I think it pushes you to kind of, like I said, question those beliefs, question who you are, question the universe, your beliefs around spirituality and whatnot. And we're going to have to take a quick break in just a second, but I'd love to come back and talk more
I'd love
about
to talk
that
about
as well. So
more.
let's take a quick break, Murray,
Well,
and we'll be back and we'll talk more about that, because that's a deep topic that I think so many queer people need to talk about as well.
In a world where every journey is unique, one path shines brightly for the queer community. Introducing QueerQuest, the first of its kind personal development platform designed exclusively for us, by us. At QueerQuest, we understand the multifaceted journey of queer identity. That's why we've created a space where you can explore, learn, and grow with the guidance of queer experts from around the globe. Whether you're seeking to enhance your physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being, QueerQuest is your gateway to transformation. Imagine embarking on quests tailored to your journey of self-discovery, finding community, and unlocking your queer excellence. QueerQuest offers online courses, coaching programs, and soon workshops, seminars, retreats, and festivals, all designed to empower you to live your best life. Ready to start your adventure? Join us at www.queerquest.vip to become part of a movement towards personal and collective greatness. Sign up today to join the waitlist and be the first to know when we launch. QueerQuest, where your journey of self-discovery and transformation begins. Don't just dream of a life filled with pride and purpose, make it your reality with QueerQuest. Visit www.queerquest.vip now. Your quest awaits.
All right, we are back with Murray here, and we've been talking deeply, and we're moving to the spirituality section, because again, we were talking about how for queer people, spirituality and the journey for spirituality, I think, is like an essential one. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about your journey and what you find from many of the people that you help through this religious kind of trauma and their sense of, journey for spirituality as well.
Yeah, I want to make sure that, again, I clarify, spirituality is a personal choice, and it's based on experience. So I don't want people to think that it has to be part of your queer experience, because it's not for some people.
Correct.
And some people, like I said, totally need that break. I needed it because it was my identity. And now looking back, because as I told you the story as a little child standing up in church and saying that's wrong, just that inherent belief that that's not the way the universe works. Um, I can now see that being gay was a gift, literally a gift that allowed me the opportunity to question, to form my own beliefs, to have actually real life, personal, meaningful, spiritual experiences that were
Yeah.
not dictated and interpreted by someone else. Like they were my own. And I think the gift of gayness to the church is something that I think is slowly starting to be recognized in some denominations and some religions. It does, like, traditionally the queer people were the healers and the shamans, and the definitely the priesthood, and a lot of ministers, because there's that sensitivity, that feeling of difference. And for me it was
And
such a
could be
gift.
wanting to help other people who have gone through similar experiences to say, hey, look, I've gone
Absolutely.
through this. There has to be some sort of meaning or deeper reason why I had to go through that. And it's probably so that I can give back and help other people. That's kind of how I feel about it personally myself.
Absolutely. But I think we're also here to transform the collective unconscious of human beings.
Yeah.
And um, culturally, like I said, historically, we were an integral part of the world. And then doctrine and dogma and the control of the church certainly changed that. And it certainly changed psychologically how that impacted on queer people. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was a big thing. It was a big thing. So for me, I remember the first time I went into there's a bookshop in the city that we lived in at the time called Banyan Books, and it was a new age bookshop.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something to cling to, and I walked into the store and I saw this book called A Course in Miracles, which was, it's a great big
Massively
3 volume.
book. It's got,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, and it's just like, I was still looking for miracles in my life. Um, Not so much the idea that I didn't want to be gay anymore, but the miracle for me was to be able to be who I am and have a sense of spirituality. So finding that, and it being a channeled text by Jesus, was like, whoa, this is, and whether you believe in that or not, for me at the moment, it was exactly what I needed.
What you needed, yeah.
So yeah, and from there, and the hours that I spent devouring that material, it taught me one of the core things about that I use in my work about forgiveness. Like the whole thing is basically about forgiveness, but not in the traditional sense. For me, forgiveness is recognizing or recognizing our innocence. It's like bringing our own innocence back. And I think really the only forgiveness that there really is on any level is self-forgiveness. And then everything else flows from there. And
Of
until
course.
that happens, there's really no way to be 100% authentic in your relationships and in your work and in anything until
And to
that
be
deep level
happy
of
and at
healing.
peace as well,
Well, that's exactly what it should be. Because the innocence part is really, I think, the core of what we all are. We are having a human experience. We all have made different choices, and to move from being being in shame, like
Yeah.
in the you talk about the Hawkins hierarchy of emotions. Shame is the lowest thing next to death, and so the church teaches us that is where we should live from that point of shame, where it's not just you feel bad because you did something. That's guilt. Shame becomes, who you are. It
Becomes
becomes your
part of your
identity.
identity. I'm ashamed of this part of myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not just ashamed. You embody shame. To be especially like I said, from my religious upbringing, the repentance had to be ongoing and forever. Like it was like, no, we didn't have confessions in my religion and that sort of thing, but you were guilted into um feeling so bad about yourself that you had to constantly recommit. And it was like this mental reinforcement of, you are bad, this is your way out, this is your only way of salvation. And then you were bad, and then this is your only way of salvation. And it was just this cycle that repeated over and over and over. And so many people with religious trauma, they have different ways that expresses in their relationships and in their choices. And like I said, in things like addiction. And I know that's not just a queer problem, but it is a part of our community for sure.
Well, it is because, when you look at some of the numbers, they say 1 in 3 queer people will suffer from addictions or substance abuse at some point in their life. So when you see that that's 2 to 3 times higher than, the general population, you go, well, there is something within our experience that is, a cause for this,
Yeah, without a doubt. And I don't think that's just spirituality. There's a, I think we are
definitely not spirituality, because there are many people that, of course,
yeah,
in our community that don't that aren't a part of that, and so it's definitely not that. But I think it's a lot to do with the internalized experience that we have to go through and isolating ourselves. And when you're isolating, you try to numb yourself, and that's by doing certain things can help you to numb yourself from the pain that you're going through. You think it's helping you. When you really look back, you realize that it was actually part of the problem.
Well, it's an escape from the problem, and I use spirituality.
Well, then it can, and then it can turn into
religion.
It can turn into the problem as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And spiritual seekers, that can be an addiction as well. Like
Totally.
If you're always looking for that thing that's going to save you and soothe you and comfort you, and again, it tends to reinforce those traumas. And traumas are really stored in our body.
In our nervous system, they're all of our emotions, the negative ones if we don't deal with them and process them, they get stored in our nervous system. And as soon as we get triggered, we can go back to those negative emotions that come, and they can almost feel like we're back in that moment,
Well, without a doubt, and sometimes without even realizing, because a lot of times a trauma is not a thing that happens. A trauma is a response. There is a catalyst for something, and then the trauma is the response that doesn't happen.
Correct.
It's kind of like, a gazelle that's eating grass in the Serengeti, and then all of a sudden a cheetah comes. That's a big it has that fight or flight. It takes off, but then it comes back down and it settles. For so many of us, when there's complex PTSD, traumas that are reinforced upon reinforced upon reinforced, the negative upon the negative on the negative, it becomes this knot that takes a long time for a lot of people to untie. And until those trauma loops are completed, like the gazelle can go back and happily eat its grass again at some point. It's not going to be, it will be aware, but for so many of us, we live constantly in this heightened sense of a lack of being safe, that we are running at that fight or flight level all the time, or fawning. A lot of people just give up and play dead, and there's lots of different ways that the experience can express itself externally.
Definitely.
But the root of it is where things need to be addressed. So
yeah, always best to deal with the root cause of whatever happened in whatever way you can. And there's so many ways out there that can help you, which is the amazing thing about life and what we do out there in the fields that we're in. And so maybe you could share now some of the things that you see are more of the common areas where people come to you for. Like, what is it that if a client comes to you, it's generally around these kinds of things?
A lot of people come with just a generalized anxiety, and like I said, that fear that never seems to go away. And
Yeah.
anxiety is usually a trauma response. A lot of people come because of their triggers. And I think triggers, we use what triggers people a lot in the work that I do, because that's a really good indicator of where that unhealed part of you is. Or the difficulty in maintaining relationships, or healthy relationships, or finding healthy relationships, or feeling you are worthy of those healthy relationships. Those are a lot of the things that we deal with. But it's the self-sabotage that that happens because of trauma, and there's a real psychological reason for that. Like when you're programmed that you are bad, and even when you escape the church, or you're kicked out of the church, or whatever situation caused you that trauma, your mind knows, your subconscious knows that you can survive that. So it will recreate circumstances and situations that it knows that you can survive. Like that's the one job really of the subconscious. It's to keep us alive. It's what keeps our heart beating and keeps us breathing. But all the mental things, the psychological things that go along with that, it will recreate situations, or cause you to make choices to be in situations that are not to your benefit, are not in your best interest, are not what you think you want, but you repeat these patterns over and over and over, because your subconscious knows you can survive it. And that's its job. Its one job is to keep you alive.
And these patterns of behavior, in some other terms, can also be addictions as well, right? It leads you to X, Y, Z, which is unhealthy for you, which is probably why they've come to you in the first place. I'm dealing with anxiety. I've got these patterns of behavior, which could be addictions or whatever, and they're not sure how to deal with it, right?
Well, exactly. It's like there's addiction is not just a physical chemical process that happens in your brain. There are steps that lead you to that point.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's and just sometimes for people, it's just, I want the ability to, a lot of them can't even say love myself, because they can't even wrap their head around that concept. I want the ability to accept myself. I want to be okay in my own skin. And a lot of the trans kids and people that I work with, it's like that again is a whole nother level, and
such a deep level of what that as well. Yeah.
Like it's astounding the level of self-loathing. And I'm not talking about just in the trans community. I'm talking about people who come from this experience of being taught you're evil. And like I said, you just, even the idea of being able to like yourself and be comfortable with yourself is a big stretch. And sometimes that's the step that I take with people. Sometimes they can go further and they can get into, I can truly love myself, and I can truly embrace my innocence, and I can truly embrace my worthiness. But it's a step-by-step process, and everyone's at a different spot. So
different spots and different struggles, different things that are going on in their life that is holding them back from getting to that place. And so, like I said, some people will be okay taking the first step or two, and they're okay getting off the train there. And some people will get to that next stop and go, actually, this isn't the end result. This is actually just part of it. And then they'll want more, which is the beauty of life. Everyone has the opportunity to choose where their stop is, And I think that's also the kind of life of, when we talk about spirituality, it's the same thing. Everyone probably deals with spirituality in some way within them, but they just don't call it that, And that's kind of the thing. It's the journey of life, in a sense, where, like I said, you can just get off, or you keep going as far as you want to, as far as you need to. And sometimes it'll stop for 10 years, 20 years, and you'll get back on, or it will.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Whatever,
It's a ride that you get on and off throughout your life. And I certainly did. I had different times when there'd be massive uncovering of trauma and memories that needed to be worked through. And unfortunately, I didn't have I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a pastor. I didn't have a
Support
religious
system.
figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of self-work. And it is okay for people to realize that that kind of self-work can be exhausting. It
Oh,
can be physically, mentally, spiritually exhausting, and it's okay to stop and breathe when you need to,
definitely.
and take that little break, and then something will come along that will either inspire or trigger something else that needs to be dealt with, and then you can get back on the ride. But if I would have had someone like you or someone like me when I was going through this, what a difference it would have made. But that wasn't my journey, and my journey allows me now the opportunity to provide that in ways that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So.
Of course. And I guess to me, that's why, Queer Quest has been birthed, is because I want there to be a space in our community where everyone is accepted and can get on that ride when they want to, for how long they want to, and know that it's not just one person's voice, it's the community's voice. There is a collective of queer coaches, healers out there who can teach you and help you heal and grow in your own life in the way that works for you, because again, one voice isn't the only voice, and we need to be standing up as a group collectively to help and support this community to rise.
Absolutely, and I want to applaud you for that. That exact statement is what made me want to reach out to you. And I think I remember one of my first comments, you had said something about wanting to form this kind of like queer collective, and I said I'd love to work with you. And I think that was one of the first comments that I ever DM'd you.
I think I remember you saying that somewhere on one of the comments on one of the posts. I remember you saying that. Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was one of the first things that I read about you. So, bravo on your work. It's so important. And, I think even for the people that don't participate, I really believe that there is a collective unconscious of humankind, and the work that we do in healing ourselves and healing our community reaches so far beyond the people who are participating to our greater community and out into the world itself. I think
And because they say that saying that hurt people. I also believe on the other side, healed people, healed people, right? And so again, if you have people who come into this and get on that ride and go on that journey, then collectively they're going to go out and be changed within the world, which can then create ripple effects that no one can even imagine possible, that you need, or to say it pinpoints here, there, and everywhere. But like I said, doing the work means that, like I said, it can collectively make changes across the globe, across the universe.
The universe, for sure. And it's like, more importantly, it can make changes right where you are. And sometimes once you heal, you don't necessarily realize the impact that your being has on people. We recently celebrated the 10th anniversary at our club, and after COVID, we weren't there a lot. Personally, my partner is a double transplant recipient, going on like 25 years. He's kind of like a medical miracle, but he was very, very susceptible because of the immunosuppressants and that sort of thing. So, with being closed for so long, and then with things kind of up and down, we stayed a little bit more isolated than we usually do. And when we walked back into our community, into our own club, and after not seeing people for quite a long time, the number of stories that came to us, you have no idea what this place has meant to me and what your support has meant to me. And you guys have been my family, and you've created a little magic spot that I can
Spaces are important, yeah.
And as much important now as I used to be, even though, it's a more queer friendly ish world, having community in any group is essential. So
And a community that is uplifting as well, because I know that so many people think that sometimes that this community isn't, which is again why QueerQuest has been created, and what you do is important, is to show people that it is actually the community at its core is based on love. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are hurt and need some support and that love, but it's like, let's create spaces where you can get that, and you can get that at your fingertips, you know?
And I think it's also so important to politics right now is really trying to divide our community, and to have a space where it's safe to be who you are and what you are, but be with other people who are the same as you but different, and that being okay. We need to make that okay again in our community, and I think that's such an important part of the gift of the community that you're creating. You know, that's like I said, we're the only gay club in a city of about 1 million people, so we have to try to be all things to all people all the time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you know, but it's magic when you walk into a place like that, and there are trans men and women, there are older people, there are kids who are their first night out at any kind of a bar, kids that who are there with their parents, kids who are there with their grandparents, kids who are there hiding in the corner for the first time because they walked into a space and just knew that they had to be there, but not knowing how to deal with it. It's just
How to manage it properly.
the magic of queer spaces, whether they be online or be a brick and mortar. I think they're so absolutely essential.
Definitely. I 100,000% agree with that, Murray. So we're going to have to wrap it up in just a minute, but I'd love to hear just a little bit about, because I think there are some people out there who would find this interesting. You mentioned that you were a foster parent for at least a decade of your life. So I'd love you to share a bit of that experience, because I think that would be important to share for the listeners out there.
It was a phenomenal experience. The province that I lived in Canada, in British Columbia, was a little bit more progressive than other places. Other places, you know, when we started being foster parents, there's other places where that wasn't allowed.
I was going to say, as gay and queer people, there is still lots of places like that. Yeah. So
absolutely. So we were openly gay and very out there, and but actually the foster parent journey started for us when I was working in a school, and one of the teachers in the school had a son who had schizophrenia and special needs, and I worked in special ed with kids with autism and that sort of thing, and she called me one weekend and she says, I can't handle this right now, can my son come and spend the weekend with you? And she was having those stresses that everybody deals with.
Of course.
So we absolutely, and 10 years later he was still with us. So that's kind of what started that. But the kids that came to live with us, like I said, they tended to be a little bit more, their life experience was challenging, for lots of different reasons.
So many different reasons. I can understand. Yeah, I'm reading between the lines here. Yeah, of course.
But it was interesting. We were very well accepted by the social workers that we work with, because we actually were able to get kids.
You got the results for them. You got some kind of bit more.
We facilitated the ability for them to get results, and that's kind of what the same as my work now. I don't do the work.
Of course,
people have to do the work, and the kids 100%. Have to do the work.
Yeah,
but we created a space where that could happen, and you know, for the most part, we had no issues. There was a couple of times where kids who were taken into care and were no longer part of their families. There's like one little guy who's lived with us for 6 or 7 years. He was adopted and then basically taken back like a puppy to the pound because it didn't work with his family situation anymore. But his parents still had to come and approve us. And it's like they came because there was like, no, he's not living with these people. And the social worker said, good, they're good guys, they'll be able to help. And they go and meet them. So they came to the door and I answered the door and they're kind of looking up and down. I'm like, were you expecting like high heels and feather boas? Because that's not, literally that's what I said. And it kind of broke the ice and we ended up having a beautiful relationship with them. And but yeah, it was an interesting experience, and it was certainly a learning experience. You know, talk about people learning to cope with an environment that can be extremely challenging, and not being able to process that information. It was a magical time. It was an exhausting time. It was a lot of work.
You did that for a decade. I can imagine it would have been exhausting to have, as you said, sometimes 6 to 8 kids in.
We had a few more occasionally, but it was one of those things that it's like a full-time job kind of thing. It's beyond a full-time job. I had a full-time job, but it was like the kids are in your home, and occasionally we'd get weekends of respite where they would go other places. But it's 24/7, and oftentimes those things, because of the nature of the behaviors of the kids that we had, our weekends were often spent rescuing the kids from problems that they got into when we weren't there. So yeah, it was a beautiful experience, though. Not for everybody, but there's a lot of people in our community who would be amazing foster parents, amazing, and not just for queer kids. I don't think we had one that potentially could have been that way. Too young to tell.
And that's the thing about being, I guess, a foster parent or a parent. It's not about anything to do with their gender, their sexuality at all. It's about helping them as a young individual who needs some support. And so the reason you did it wasn't, I need to help all these queer people. It was because you wanted to help younger people, right?
It was because people needed love, and I knew what it was like when the lack of understanding of who I was as a person caused that love to be taken away. So it was an opportunity to give back. So
correct. And that's a beautiful thing that you've done, and something that I look forward to being able to do in whatever capacity that is in my life, whether it's fostering, whether it's adopting. You know, there's definitely that in my future. I see it. Yeah.
I'm excited for you for that. That'll be beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, Murray. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing your experiences. Where can the people find you?
You know, I am a bit of a tech. I have a bit of a tech issue.
He's just recently come online, guys. He's moving into the 21st century now.
Yeah, I have to do this strange new world. It's another new world for me. But I'm on Facebook. My name, Murray Browatze. You can find me on Facebook.
I'll link it below as well. When we put this in the comments, you'll be able to link straight to Murray if you're interested in learning more or talking to him about, you know, what he does and maybe how it can support you moving forward as well.
I'd love that. And I have a Facebook group that people can join in, participate in, and meet other people with similar experiences and very different experiences. We have the full spectrum of people from different religious backgrounds and different nationalities and different upbringings and different ages. And it's a fascinating place to share love and information. So I'll make sure that you have that link as well.
Yeah, give me that link and I'll share that with the people as well, because I think for a lot of people that could be very helpful to find a safe space for them to be.
Well, thank you for facilitating that for me.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for having us on here, coming on the podcast, Murray. For everyone out there, thank you for listening. You can send me your comments, your questions, and I'll always answer those for you. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Queer Quest podcast. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey towards love and happiness? Introducing the 21-day Gay Men's Guide to Love and Happiness. This isn't just a course, it's a pathway to discovering your true self, overcoming challenges, and embracing happiness. Join hundreds of gay men who found joy and freedom. Learn from Cristiano Green, a coach with 20 years experience and a journey like yours. For a limited time, get this life-changing course at 75% off with a 100% risk-free guarantee. There's nothing to lose, but so much to gain. Your new life is just a click away. Enroll in the 21-day Gay Layman's Guide to Love and Happiness today. Visit theglobalpridecollective.com and start your journey towards a happier, more fulfilled you.